She had loved him for 7 years before she understood that loving someone who does not see you is not love so much as a long, slow form of disappearing. This was not a dramatic understanding. It did not arrive in a single moment of clarity, though later she would identify the gala as the moment she could point to and say, "There." Before the gala, it had been accumulating, the way water accumulates in a low place, incrementally, unannounced, until one day the low place is full and the water has nowhere left to go. Before the gala, she had been managing the accumulation the way she managed everything in Blackwood Manor. Systematically, without calling attention to the managing, with the specific efficiency of a woman who had learned that the work was most effective when it was most invisible. That was the problem in the end, the most effective invisibility. But before we go to the gala, before we stand in the ballroom and watch a man ask the woman he has been casually breaking for 7 years to fetch a glass for her future mistress, I need to ask you something. If you had spent 7 years being the invisible architecture of someone's life, managing everything they relied on without knowing they relied on it, loving them without them, knowing you loved them, and you finally understood that the invisibility was never going to end on its own, what would you do? Would you make yourself seen? Or would you simply leave and let the absence say what the presence never could? Drop your answer in the comments. Because Clara chose to leave, and what the leaving revealed is the rest of this story. Subscribe and hit the bell, and tell me where you are watching from tonight. Your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room. Now, let's begin. She had come to Blackwood Manor at 19, which was old enough to know the shape of the work, and young enough to not yet know the shape of what the work would cost her. She had been hired as a parlour maid and had become, over 7 years, something that did not have a clean title, not a housekeeper, because Mrs. Fenn was the housekeeper, but not a parlour maid either, because parlour maid did not manage the Duke's private correspondence schedule or ensure that the specific books he needed for parliamentary preparation were on his desk the morning before he needed them, or know, without being told, that when the weather was cold and wet, his tea should be brought at 10:30 rather than 11, because he always worked earlier on cold, wet days and was always irritable by 11 if the tea had not come. She knew these things because she had been paying attention for 7 years. She had been paying attention in the specific way of someone who cared about what they were paying attention to, not the professional attention of a person who is good at their job, though she was that, but the other kind, the kind that came from wanting the person you were attending to be well in the way that mattered, which was beyond the professional boundary, which was the kind she had not chosen but had arrived, at the way water arrived in a low place. Sebastian Ashbourne, Duke of Blackwood, was a brilliant man who was also a profoundly oblivious one, and the combination had the specific quality of something that was wonderful from a distance and costly up close. He was brilliant in the way of people who thought about large things with great precision and did not organize their attention around small things. And the small things were where she lived. She lived in the small things. She was the small things. She was the 10 minutes in the morning when his coat needed to be buttoned and the fire needed to be higher and the day's DARS correspondence needed to be organized in order of urgency before he saw it. He talked to her during the coat buttons. This was the thing she had told herself. In the years before she understood what she was telling herself was something. He talked to her while she did the buttons. Not about the buttons, not about the house, about the things he was thinking about. The parliamentary debate he was preparing for, the estate account matter he was working through, the book he was reading that had a point he disagreed with and wanted to articulate. He talked to her because she was there and because she was good at listening and because the quality of her listening was different from the quality of the various political associates and social companions he engaged with. They had agendas. She had none that he could see, which made her the specific kind of audience a man trusted with his thinking in the way he did not trust an audience with stakes. She listened. She was good at it. She knew when to say something and what to say, and when to not say anything at all. And he would button the last button himself and go to his day, and she would go to hers. And the conversation would sit with her all morning in the specific way of conversations that mattered to one participant more than the other. She had told herself, for years, that this was something. She had been wrong about what it was. Morgan Alcott came into Sebastian's life in February of the 7th year, which was a cold February, with the specific grey quality of winters that have lasted longer than anyone wanted, and show no signs of conclusion. She arrived at Blackwood for a dinner party, and she left it 3 hours later, and in the 3 hours in between she had made 2 decisions that she communicated to no one, but that Clara, who had been managing the evening service, understood from the quality of her attention to Sebastian, which was the attention of a woman who had assessed an acquisition and was determining the terms. Clara managed the courtship with the efficiency she managed everything. She prepared the rooms for Morgan's visits. She ensured the house was at its best. She managed the flowers and the refreshments and the specific 1,000 details of a household that was being presented to a potential duchess. And she did all of this with the same composed efficiency. She brought to everything, and she did not examine what it was costing her, because examining it would have required a language she had not developed for it. She would understand later that the not examining was itself a kind of self-protection that she had known on some level and had chosen not to know on the level where knowing required doing something. The doing something was the part she had not reached yet. Sebastian talked to her about Morgan during the coat buttons. She would have preferred not to hear it. She heard it because he was talking and she was there, and this was the arrangement. He talked about Morgan's family and her estate management and her social connections and the various practical advantages of the match, with the specific quality of a man who had made a pragmatic decision and was organizing his thinking about it. He did not talk about Morgan the way you talked about someone you loved. He talked about her the way he talked about the parliamentary account matter, with the clear-eyed assessment of someone who had evaluated the relevant factors and reached a defensible conclusion. She had buttoned his coat, and she had listened, and she had said once in October, "She seems very capable." He had looked at her. "Yes," he said, "very capable." He had picked up his portfolio. "The Hartwell dinner this evening." "The blue coat," she said. "The Chandler's invoice needs to go to Holt before 4. I've put it on the right side of the correspondence stack." "Thank you, Clara," he said, in the tone he used for the 10 small things she managed before he arrived at the day's significant ones. He went to his day. She went to hers. The gala was a Thursday in late November. She had managed the preparation for it with the household staff for a week, the Blackwood estate rooms that were used for large social events, the caterers, the musicians, the specific choreography of 100 small decisions that produced, on the evening itself, an appearance of effortlessness that was entirely Clara's work and would be attributed to the house's general excellence. She was working the evening in the way she worked events, present but peripheral, the infrastructure of the occasion rather than a participant in it. She carried the tray with the efficiency of 7 years of this particular work, and she was near the entrance to the main salon at 9 o'clock when Sebastian came to the room's centre and called for attention. He was good at rooms. This was one of the things she had always found. He was genuinely good at rooms, at the specific management of a large social gathering, at the quality of authority that was not performed, but simply was. He stood in the center of the room, and 300 people organized their attention toward him, with the ease of people responding to something natural. He spoke about the season and the occasion and the various pleasantries of a man at a social event who is building to something. She was near the door, and she was watching him with the specific quality of 7 years of watching him. The attention that had become so practiced, she no longer registered it as extraordinary. And then he said Morgan's name, and he held out his hand. Morgan came to his side with the specific quality of a woman who has practiced this moment and is executing it with precision. He announced the engagement. The room received it with the warmth of 300 people, receiving the expected outcome of a situation they had been observing. Clara received it on the tray she was holding, which was where she was receiving everything that evening. He looked up. The specific quality of how he looked up. She would never know whether this was accidental or whether some part of him knew she was there and needed to find her. And she would never know because she would not be there for him to tell her. He found her near the door and he looked at her, and he said, with the easy naturalness of a man who said things to her, because they were both just features of his house. Clara, fetch a glass for Lady Morgan, would you? Her future mistress deserves champagne. The room did not hear it. The room was doing what rooms do at engagement announcements. The warmth, the congratulations, the movement toward the couple. She heard it. She stood near the door of the main salon of Blackwood Manor with the tray in her hands, and she heard her future mistress, and she felt the specific quality of something that had been accumulating for 7 years reach the point of fullness. And the fullness had nowhere to go, and she looked at Sebastian Ashbourne, who was already looking back at the room, and she thought, this is the place I have been standing, and this is who I am in it, and I am going to leave now. She got the champagne, she delivered it, she finished the evening with the specific professional precision of 7 years of this work, because she was not going to leave a job unfinished, even this one, even tonight. She went home to the servants' quarters. She folded her uniform. She placed it on the bed. She walked out into the London fog with her coat and her savings, and the specific clean quality of a woman who has made a decision and is going to live in it. She did not leave a note. She did not think she owed him an explanation. He had not required an explanation for 7 years of everything she had done. She did not require one for the leaving. The absence would explain itself. The first week after Clara left, Sebastian's morning correspondence was in the wrong order. This was the first thing. The second thing was the ledger, the private estate ledger that he reviewed monthly, which he could not find on the Tuesday he went to review it, which he had never needed to find before, because it had always been on the desk when he needed it. He looked for it for 40 minutes before admitting to Holt that he did not know where it was, and Holt had looked at him with the specific expression of a man who has known where things were for 20 years and has just understood that the person who was managing the system is no longer managing it. The ledger was in the 3rd drawer of the East cabinet. It had always been in the 3rd drawer of the East cabinet. He had not known this. He had not known this because he had not needed to know it, because Clara had put it there. He stood in the study with the ledger in his hand, and he thought about this. He thought about the Tuesday ledger, and then he thought about the correspondence order, and then he thought about the cold, wet mornings, and the 10:30 tea. And he thought about these things with the specific quality of a man who is understanding, for the first time, the architecture of something he has been living in for 7 years without seeing it. Morgan arrived on the Wednesday to discuss the estate's management transition, which she was proposing to oversee in advance of their marriage in the specific way of someone who views the acquisition as already acquired. She began with the library. He had not specifically said she could not reorganize the library. He had not said anything specific about the library because he had not imagined the library was a thing that required a position statement. The library was the library. The specific organization of it that had been there for 7 years, which he had always found exactly what he needed without knowing how he found it. It's entirely irrational, Morgan said. The organization makes no sense. I've had my librarian draw up a proper scheme. Leave the library, he said. She looked at him. Sebastian. Leave the library as it is, he said. She left the library with the specific quality of a woman who is noting a data point for later, rather than genuinely withdrawing the position. He went to the library that evening alone, and he stood in it and he looked at the shelves. He walked along them slowly, pulling books out and replacing them. And he understood, as he moved through the room, that the organization was not irrational. It was organized by when he needed things. The parliamentary volumes near the desk, in the order of the current session's priorities, the estate histories, it was organized for him. It had been organized for him by someone who had been watching what he reached for, and when, for 7 years. He sat down in the chair by the window. He sat there for a long time. The dried flower was on his desk in the 3rd week. He had not known it was there. He had walked past it for. He did not know how long. It was in the small ceramic dish at the corner of his desk, a dried stem of something he could not name, which had been there in the peripheral vision of every working day, and which he had not looked at directly in however long it had been there. Morgan picked it up. This, she said, with the specific precision of a woman expressing distaste for something that does not meet her standards, is peasant rubbish. She put it in the wastebasket. She continued talking. She was talking about the estate social calendar for the coming year, which she had been developing with the thoroughness of a woman who had found the existing arrangements inadequate and had applied herself to the revision. She was talking about it with the specific quality of someone who was telling rather than discussing, which was a quality he had been noting about Morgan's speech for some weeks now, and which he had been filing under the category of things he would address at a later point. He was looking at the wastebasket. He was not hearing the social calendar. He was thinking about the dried flower in the wastebasket, and about the desk where it had been, and about the 7 years of working at that desk, and about the fact that it had been there in the periphery every day, without his knowing it was there, which meant someone had put it there, and tended it there, and replaced it when it was past keeping. He picked the flower out of the wastebasket. Morgan stopped talking. He held the flower, and he looked at Morgan, who was looking at him with the expression of a woman who has just been interrupted in a manner she finds incomprehensible. He thought about the coat buttons and the morning conversations. He thought about how she talked to him. The specific quality of her talking, which was the talking of a woman who was using the conversation rather than having it. He thought about every conversation with Morgan, and he tried to find one in which he had said something, and she had received it in the way that Clara received things. The actual receiving, the quality of being heard by someone who was genuinely attending. He could not find one. He looked at the flower. He looked at Morgan. "You haven't heard a single word I've said in months," he said. Morgan looked at him. "Pardon? I told you about the northern estate drainage problem in September," he said. "I explained it in some detail because it's a significant matter. In October, you asked me about the northern estate drainage problem as though I had never mentioned it." Morgan's expression reorganized. "Sebastian, I can't be expected to. I told you about the position I was taking on the Coventry bill," he said. "The following week you told me you didn't understand my position on the Coventry bill." "That's entirely. I told you the library organization was not to be changed," he said. "Yesterday, the library arrangement is." "Morgan," he said. She stopped. He looked at her with the specific quality of a man who has been moving toward a conclusion for 3 months and has arrived at it. "You love the Duke of Blackwood," he said. "You have been very clear about that, and I believe you entirely. You love the estate and the title and the specific package of social and financial consequence that comes with the name." He looked at the flower. "You have never loved Sebastian. You have not, in 8 months, shown any interest in him specifically." He put the flower on the desk. "I find I cannot. I find I am not able to marry someone who does not know the difference." She stared at him. "You are being," she said, with the precision of someone locating the correct word, "absurd." "Perhaps," he said, "but I am being absurd on my own behalf, which is something I should have started doing considerably earlier." He broke the engagement at the Pemberton tea. He had not intended to do it there specifically. He had been intending to do it privately, which was the appropriate way to do these things. And then the Pemberton tea had happened, and Morgan had been mid-sentence about the appropriate manner of addressing a formal correspondence when he had looked at her face and understood that he could not spend another week in the same sentence. He said what he said. The tea received it with the specific electrified silence of a gathering that has witnessed something unprecedented and has not yet determined how to process it. He left. He went back to Blackwood, which was empty in the way it had been empty since November. Not uninhabited, it had 30 staff and Mrs. Fenn and Holt, but empty in the specific sense of a house that has lost the person who was its animating intelligence without knowing that it was losing her until she was gone. He sat in the library. For 3 hours, and he thought about 7 years with the specific quality of a man who is conducting a forensic examination of the evidence and is finding, in the evidence, things he missed at the time. He went through the years of coat buttons and tea times, and the ledger and the flower and the library organization, and the morning conversations and the parliamentary preparation and the dozen other things she had curated with the invisible competence of someone who cared about the person they were caring for. He thought about the gala. Fetch a glass for her future mistress. He had said it. He had said it without thinking, because he had not been thinking. He had not been thinking about her in the way that would have required him to register what he was saying before he said it. He had been thinking about Morgan and the engagement and the room and the public moment, and Clara had been the periphery, the way the flower was in the periphery, the way the library organization was in the periphery, the way everything she did was in the periphery, because the periphery was where she lived in his life. He had made her peripheral. She had not been peripheral. She had been the center of the thing, and he had been standing in the center, thinking he was the center, and she had been the center behind him, holding it together, the invisible architecture of everything. He had asked her to fetch a glass. He put his face in his hands. He stayed in the library until midnight, and then he went to her old room, which no one had taken, because no one had quite managed to take it. And he stood in the doorway and looked at the neatly made bed and the empty surfaces and the specific quality of an absence that was more present than most presences. He did not know where she had gone. He spent the next month finding out. Covent Garden in March had the specific quality of markets in early spring. The first good weather after winter, the market fuller than it had been in months, the vendors and the customers and the general population of London's working life in the outdoor commerce of a Tuesday morning. He had found her through a method that had taken 3 months and had required more of his parliamentary connections than he was comfortable with, which he had used anyway. And the final piece of information had been delivered by a woman who sold bread, 2 stalls down from the flowers, and who had looked at him with the specific assessment of a person who had been told someone was looking for her friend, and had decided whether this person was the kind of looking she approved of. He had been, apparently, approved of. He was not certain he deserved it. He came to Covent Garden on a Tuesday morning in March, in a coat that was not the coat for this, which was the only coat he had, because he had not thought about coats this morning. He had been thinking about what he was going to say, which was a problem, because he had been thinking about it for 3 months, and had not arrived at anything sufficient. He came around the corner of the market, into the flower section, and he saw her. She was behind the stall with the specific quality of someone who had found their place in a thing, not the quality of a woman who had been reduced to a flower stall from a better life. The quality of a woman who was doing something she had chosen, and was doing it with the full engagement of someone present in what they were doing. She was talking to a customer with the warm directness that he recognized, that he had been the recipient of for 7 years, in the specific managed version available in her professional register. And now he was seeing it deployed without the management, and it was what it had always been, but visible now. She saw him. The warm directness remained with the customer, who finished the transaction and left. Then she looked at him with the clear, even gaze of a woman who has been expecting this and has decided how she is going to stand in it. He stood at the edge of the flower stall. She was alive with it, he thought, with the market and the morning and the spring and the choosing. She had the quality of a person who was their own person, which was not the quality she had had in his house, where she had been the house. He thought about what she had been doing for 7 years. He thought about the coat buttons and the invisible architecture and the library organized for the specific shape of how he reached for things. He thought about the flower in the wastebasket and the 7 years he had spent with a woman's genuine care as the wallpaper of his life. Unremarked, unthanked, unseen. He had asked her to fetch a glass. He sank to his knees. Not as a performance. He had not planned this. He had planned to speak to her, to have the conversation he had been preparing for 3 months, to say the things in the order that was most likely to produce the outcome he needed. He had not planned to be on his knees, in the mud of Covent Garden in the wrong coat on a Tuesday morning. He was on his knees. The market had the specific quality of 300 people, collectively noticing something and proceeding with what they were doing, while also not proceeding with what they were doing. He looked at her. Clara, he said. She looked at him. The house is a tomb, he said. I am a ghost in it. I spent 7 years as your master, and I did not understand. I did not see what you were doing, which was everything, which was the entire thing, which was the difference between a house and a home, and I walked through it for 7 years, thinking the difference was wallpaper. He was not looking away from her. I found the ledger in the 3rd drawer of the East cabinet, in the 2nd week. The 3rd week I understood the library. He stopped. The flower, on my desk. Something moved in her face. It was lavender, she said quietly. You always work better when there's something on the desk that isn't work. You don't know that about yourself. I know it now, he said. I know it because you showed me. He looked up at her from the mud of the market. I am not asking you to come back to be my housekeeper. I am not asking you to come back to be the invisible architecture of my life again, which is what I was doing before without knowing I was doing it. He held her gaze. I am asking for the chance to learn what I missed. Not to be your master. I want to be the person who is worth the 7 years. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long time with the look that was her actual look. The clear, even one. The one that saw what was there. You broke the engagement, she said. 3 months ago, he said. I heard, she said. At the Pemberton tea. Yes. Morgan will have said things. Morgan said many things, he said. I was not listening. The corner of her mouth moved. She controlled it. You're kneeling in the mud, she said. I know, he said. Your coat is ruined, she said. I know that too, he said. She looked at him. at the Duke of Blackwood on his knees in the mud of Covent Garden, with the wrong coat and the bloodshot eyes of a man who had not been sleeping, and who was asking a flower vendor for something she had no obligation to give him. A duke belongs in a palace, she said. I have a palace, he said. It's a tomb. A man belongs where he is loved, she said. He looked at her. Go home, Sebastian, she said. He did not move. She looked at him. I said, go home, she said. I know you did, he said. I'm not going. She looked at him for another moment. I'm in the market until 6, she said. You're in the way of the customers. Tell me what to do, he said. Tell me where to stand. She looked at the stall beside hers. It was empty. The previous occupant had left in February, and the stall had not been filled. She looked at him. The woman who manages the market lets stalls on a monthly basis, she said. She's in the office, at the south entrance. He got up. He went to the south entrance. He let the stall. He came back. He was not good at it initially. He did not know the names of most of the flowers, and he priced things incorrectly 3 times in the first week. And he dropped an entire bucket of tulips on a Wednesday, and the market received all of this with the specific quality of a community that is watching something unusual and has not yet decided whether to find it charming or irritating. He asked questions. This was one of the things he was good at. The parliamentary training of a man who understood that information was obtained by asking for it, and that asking for it required humility about what you did not know. He asked the woman 2 stalls down about the pricing. He asked the man across the way about the early morning delivery schedule. He asked Clara, when she was willing to answer, about the flowers themselves. She was not immediately willing to answer. She was present with him in the way of someone who was noting the evidence with the clear, even gaze and not yet reaching a conclusion. She answered practical questions about the market. She did not answer the other kinds yet. He did not press the other kinds. He had pressed enough, for enough years, on the things he wanted, without asking whether the wanting was something she could give. He was not going to make that error again. He learned the flowers. This was not a small thing. There were many of them, and they had specific requirements and specific names and specific customers who came for specific varieties, and the vendors who supplied them had specific personalities and specific preferred methods of transaction. He learned these things with the parliamentary attention he brought to matters he had decided were worth learning, which was the same attention he brought to the Coventry Bill and the Northern Estate, drainage and the various significant matters of his life. He had not, before, brought this attention to the question of what mattered to the person standing next to him. He was bringing it now. In the 3rd week, on a Thursday, he was with a customer who wanted something for a grandmother's birthday and was uncertain what the appropriate choice was, and he said something about the primrose, something accurate, which he had learned from asking Clara the previous week, about what primrose meant in the traditional language of flowers, and why it was appropriate for the specific occasion. He heard her beside him pause. He did not look. He finished the transaction, and the customer left pleased. You remembered the primrose, she said. You told me on Tuesday, he said, that a customer had asked, and you'd recommended it for a long-standing affection. I wrote it down. She was quiet for a moment. You took notes, she said. I take notes on everything important, he said. She looked at the flowers she was arranging. I was not, apparently, in the important category before, she said, not bitterly, with the precision she brought to accurate statements. No, he said. You were in the permanent category, which I had confused with the unimportant one. They are not the same. He looked at the primrose. The permanent things are the most important. I had it backward. She did not respond to this immediately. She arranged the flowers with the focus she brought to her work, which was complete and genuine, and he stood in his stall and he waited. The lavender, she said finally. on your desk. Yes, he said. I replaced it every 3 weeks, she said, for 4 years. He looked at the primrose. 4 years, he said. You worked better with it there, she said. You probably still do. He was quiet. I have lavender in the back, she said. If you want some. For the desk. He looked at her. She was looking at the flowers she was arranging, with the composed, even quality of a woman who has made a small offering and is not making more of it than it is. Yes, he said. I would like that. She brought him a bundle from the back of the stall. She handed it to him with the practical quality of one vendor something thing to another, which was the register available to her right now, and he took it with the understanding that this was the register available, and that the other registers would not be available until he had earned them. He put the lavender on the small shelf in the back of his stall. He thought it probably did nothing for a flower stall. He thought he would keep it anyway. April came with the specific quality of London in spring. The market fuller, the days longer, the specific energy of the city in better weather than it had had in months. He had been at the stall for 6 weeks. He was better at it now. Not good. He did not think good was the word, yet, but competent in the way of someone who has been applying themselves to something and has begun to see results. He knew the customers who came regularly and he knew what they preferred. And he had developed, across 6 weeks, the beginning of the relationships that the market ran on. The specific community of people who worked in the same place every day, which was its own kind of knowledge. He had not had this knowledge before. He had been the Duke, which was a category that placed him above the daily texture of most people's lives, which was a category he had occupied without examining what the elevation cost in terms of actual contact with the world. He was examining it now. Clara watched this with the clear, even gaze. He knew she was watching because he had become, across 6 weeks, as attentive to her as she had been to him for 7 years. Not perfectly, not yet, but with the genuine application of a man who understood that this was the work and who had no competing investment in avoiding the work. He had no pride left to protect in this market. He had spent it all on a Tuesday in March, in a puddle. The freedom of that was, he found, considerable. He had been managing his pride for 30 years. And the management had been expensive in ways he had not calculated. Because you did not calculate the cost of things you had not questioned. He was not managing it anymore. He was sitting on a wooden crate outside his stall on a Thursday afternoon in April, eating the bread he had bought from the woman 2 stalls down, who had decided 6 weeks ago that he was not going to be a problem and had been increasingly friendly since. And he was thinking about the parliamentary session that was beginning in May and about whether the stall could be managed by someone else during the session or whether he would need to close it, when Clara came out of her stall with 2 cups of tea. She handed him one. He looked at it. He looked at her. She sat down on the crate beside her own stall, which she had dragged to its current position 2 weeks ago, because the angle of the afternoon sun was better there, and she drank her tea with the composed quality of a woman who is sitting in the sun on a Thursday afternoon and finds this acceptable. He held the tea. She had made it with the specific proportion that she knew he preferred, which he understood immediately, because 7 years of his tea had been made with this proportion. And he had not known that he knew it until right now, until it was in his hands in the market, and she was sitting 3 feet away drinking her own. "Thank you," he said, not in the tone he had used for 7 years, the habitual thank you for the managed service of his managed life. With the actual tone, the tone that contained what the thank you was for, which was not the tea specifically. She looked at him. She looked at the tea. She looked at the market. "The parliamentary session starts in May," she said. "Yes," he said. "Will you go?" "I have to," he said. "The Coventry Bill is in its 2nd reading. I have a position on it that I intend to articulate." She was quiet for a moment. You always argued for the second clause, she said. The one about the agricultural provision. He looked at her. You talked about it during. She stopped. She looked at the market. During the coat buttons. In January. 2 years ago. You remembered that, he said. I remembered everything you said during the coat buttons, she said, in the tone of someone making a precise and somewhat painful observation about a practice they are no longer going to engage in. He was quiet. I talked to you, he said. Yes, she said. About everything, he said. Yes, she said. And you remembered it, he said. Yes, she said. He sat with the tea and the April sun and the market and the specific weight of what she had just said, which was not an accusation, but was also not an accusation. She had remembered everything he said during the coat buttons. She had been that present with his words, with his thinking, with him specifically. And he had been talking to the room, to the convenient audience, to the wallpaper. I want to tell you something, he said. She looked at him. I have been thinking about this for 6 weeks, he said, about the right way to say it. I have drafts. I am not going to use the drafts because the drafts were the version that was managed for effect, and I am not managing things for effect anymore. He held the tea. I missed you. Not the house, not the ledger and the library and the coat buttons, though I missed those too, and I understand now what I was missing. I missed you. The specific quality of you being in the room, the way a conversation was different when you were the one I was having it with. He looked at her. I missed Sebastian talking to Clara, not the Duke talking to the maid. I missed the actual thing which I did not understand was an actual thing until it was gone. She was very still. I know that you don't owe me that, he said. I know that 7 years of not seeing you does not become all right, because I have been sitting in a market for 6 weeks, learning the names of flowers. I know the accounting on this does not resolve quickly. He looked at the primrose in his stall. I am not asking you to resolve it. I am asking whether it can be open. She looked at him, the clear, even gaze, the gaze that saw what was there. You remembered the second clause, she said, of the Coventry Bill. Yes, he said. You said it was the most important part, she said. You said the rest of the bill would fail without it. I still think that, he said. She drank her tea. The parliamentary session, she said. You'll need the ledger ready before you go. The estate management during a session requires advance preparation. He looked at her. I know where it is now, he said. 3rd drawer of the East Cabinet. The Tuesday before you leave, she said, with the careful quality of someone offering something they are not calling what it is yet. I could review the preparation, make sure everything is in order. He was very still. You don't have to do that, he said. I know, she said. I know I don't have to. She drank her tea. He drank his tea. The market moved around them with the specific energy of an April Thursday, full and warm and entirely indifferent to the 2 people sitting on wooden crates, drinking tea in the afternoon sun. He did not say anything else. He understood that something had been offered and received, and that the next step was not to press it, but to hold it with the care appropriate to something that had been extended carefully and deserved careful handling. He sat in the sun. He thought about the Tuesday before he left, about the ledger and the East Cabinet and the library and the lavender on the desk. He thought about the coat buttons and the morning conversations and the 7 years he had spent with the best audience he would ever have, not knowing it was the best audience he would ever have. He thought about the gala and fetch a glass for her future mistress, and the specific cold shame of that sentence which had been sitting with him since November. He was going to spend a long time earning the Tuesday before he left. He was going to start by being present enough to deserve the presents. He sat on the wooden crate in the mud of Covent Garden in April, the Duke of Blackwood, drinking tea made with the right proportion, and he was very careful with everything. Across from him, Clara did not look at him yet, but she had not moved away, and the afternoon was long. Tell me in the comments, which moment stayed with you? Was it the coat buttons, the flower in the wastebasket, the knees in the mud, or the tea on the Thursday afternoon in April? Drop it below. I want to know what you're carrying from this one, and tell me where you're watching from. Your city, your country. Let me know who is in the room tonight. Subscribe and hit the bell, because the next story opens with a woman who has just been handed a letter from the solicitor informing her that her husband left everything. Not to his family, not to his heir, but to the woman no one knew existed. I'll see you there.